Yeah, good afternoon, good evening. Hi, Théo. Nice to have you here
Hi.
tonight at our second Stubaicup online meeting. So, Théo is the four-time acro world champion, the leading head of the scene. So, it's a very big pleasure to have you here tonight, Théo.
Thank you so much. I'm super happy. It will be my second presentation. I was here last year, and I'm super happy to be here, and also looking forward to be in the official cup in 1 month. But happy to do the presentation today.
Yeah, countdown is running. Stubaicup is going to be in 4 weeks on site in Neustift. So be sure you already did your registration to all pilots out there at stubaicup.at, and be sure you come. So
I will be here.
Yeah, you will come anyway. Perfect, thank you. So maybe just start with your presentation.
Yeah. So as everyone know, I'm an acro pilot, and of course, being an acro pilot is a lot about doing tricks and doing a lot of funny things in the air. But it's also a lot about having problems in the air, because of course, when you're an acro pilot, you are bound to fail sometimes. And so my presentation, which I will show you right now, is about flying incident. So what are flying incidents? Basically, sorry. Okay. So what are flying incidents? Flying incidents are all the incidents that can happen to you during flying. So they range from like collapses to cravat to twist. All those incidents that we actually work on safety courses, so on SIV courses. And all those incidents are really important in acro flying because we experience them a lot. And so after years of experience, I try to identify them so that when I experience one, I can react faster. Because when you experience a flying incident, the most important is to react as fast as possible. So my biggest flying incident, you would say, was in Ixalp, actually. This is a photo right now, which is in this on the screen. It was when I hit the cable with Nick Donini. So basically, this is one of the flying incidents that you can't really predict. But then once the flying incident happens, you have a lot of things that you can do to manage the situation. And so in this presentation, I will talk mostly about how to manage the most typical flying incident and how to react. Okay? So first thing first, you have how to behave when you get a flying incident, because that's really important when you're a pilot to anticipate. It's like when we talk about rescue, it's super important to anticipate the fact that you might have to use your rescue in your pilot's life. And it's the same. It's even more important to anticipate the fact that you might get a collapse, you might get some troubles, you might get into some troubles in your pilot's life. So it's super important to anticipate this and to think about it beforehand. So the first thing that you have to do is think about all the safety measures that you would need as a pilot to do if you get a flying incident. And the first thing that I do and that everyone should do is first of all to check your altitude. So you are getting a collapse at some altitude. The first thing to know is how high am I, where am I compared to the ground. You know, so it's super important, because if you are super low, then probably it will be a rescue situation because you won't have time to react. Or if you are super high, then you can be a bit less stressed because you know you have a lot of altitude. And in the same time, it's super important to keep your direction, because if you are along a cliff, if you get a collapse and you turn towards the cliff, then you might get into trouble. So it's super important to check your altitude and keep the direction at the same time. It's kind of a one movement. And this is something that you have to repeat in your head all the time. That's what I say about flying incidents, is that it's what you have to do is something that you have to repeat in your head, even though it doesn't happen to you, or even though it might never happen to you. It's something that you have to repeat so that you react accordingly. So first thing first, you check your altitude, you keep your direction in order to avoid going to a nasty place or to avoid losing your direction. And then you try to recognize what type of incident you are in, because there are many more things than collapses in paragliding. We can get cravats, we can get twisted, we can get into stall, a parachute, or anything, okay? So there are many types of incidents, and it's super important to try to recognize them. And then, obviously, when you recognize it, it's important to adapt your action accordingly. And that's what we'll talk in the rest of this presentation. Of course, then if any of those options is not available to you, so if you cannot check your altitude, or if when you check you think that you are low, if you cannot keep your direction, if you don't recognize the type of incident you are in, or if you don't know how to react, then it's what I call the rescue situation, and then you have to use your rescue, because obviously you have no idea how to recover from this incident. And as I always say during the rescue presentation, and as I always say about rescue, there is no shame about using it. If it's too much for you, use your rescue, and that's another presentation, but that's absolutely no problem. Okay. What not to do when you get a flying incident? So imagine you get a collapse. So a frontal collapse. What not to do in this situation is stall straight away. So many pilots, when they panic, they have a tendency to go hands down, like a safety position, which is usually a big mistake, because then you can just increase this flying incident. So it's super important to not stall straight away, okay? Another thing that you need to not to do is to let the glider go into an autorotation. So you are the pilot, you are the master of your equipment. It's super important as a pilot to always keep the mastery over your glider. So it's super important to never let your glider go into a direction you do not want to, okay? So it's super important to remember that if my glider is turning a direction I don't want to, I counter in order to always fly straight, okay? To always fly in the direction I decided. It's super important, first of all, because autorotation are dangerous, but also because you never know what's on your right, or you never know what's on your left, or maybe you don't have the altitude because then you go down. So this is super important. And obviously, it's super important not to freeze. So it's super important not to be so scared that you don't do anything, okay? Because this happens sometimes. We are all humans, and me as well as an acro-pilot. I have had sometimes when I was just like blown away by the situation, and it's super important in this moment when you see that you don't understand anything, then the rescue is the only possibility, but it's still an action. It's still something that you can do. So it's super important never to freeze to the stage where you can't even use your rescue, okay? And then it's super important to keep in mind a certain set of rules, okay, that you keep in mind as pilots. So the first rule, I think it's the most important one actually, is to always set an altitude limit when you get to a flying incident. So for myself, I know that if I get any type of incident under a certain altitude, which is around 70 meters for me, I will pull the rescue immediately. Whatever the incident is, whatever happens, I will pull the rescue straight away. This is my choice. You can use 100 meters, 200 meters, 300, 500, 1,000 meters. It doesn't matter. But it's super important to set an altitude limit. Why? Because for most pilots, they will think, okay, if something happens at 100 meters, I will pull the rescue. But when something does happen at 100 meters, sometimes they say, it's just a collapse, and it's just a really small cravat. I can sort it out. But it's already past their limit. And once you pass your limit, and once you are below 100 meters and you said, I would pull at 100 meters, then the chances are you will never pull, okay? So it's super important that if something happens below your altitude limit, it's the moment to pull the rescue. That is a really important part of your pilot's skills that you need to master, is also master the mind game about flying, is being able to decide when it's over, okay? Obviously, you have to keep in mind that you need to always check down. The third thing is that you have to keep in mind that some situations are unsolvable. There are some, and some you can't do anything about them, and it's a rescue straight away. And as I said, that you have to keep in mind that there is no shame in throwing the rescue. Okay, so this is how to behave in a general term when you get a flying incident. But now we will get a bit deeper into how to behave into the most difficult flying incident. I'm not talking about collapses, because it's kind of a common knowledge that when you get a collapse, when it's a front collapse, you go hands up and the glider reopens. When it's a side collapse, you counter to keep your direction and the glider reopens. So this is common knowledge. But what I want to focus on this presentation will be the cravats and the twists, which are the most dangerous flying incidents, and also the ones that are the less talked about. Okay, and we will shortly talk about autorotation, but mostly about cravats and twists. All right. So cravats. First thing first, you have to know that there are three types of cravats. It's quite important to know them all. Particularly if you are an acropilot. I mean, if you are an acropilot, it's a must to know all those type of cravats. If you are a leisure pilot, a normal pilot, I will still advise you to know them because it's quite important. You have to react in a different way every time you will see those cravats. Okay? So you have three types of cravats. The first one is what we call the front cravat. So what is a front cravat? It's basically when the glider is stuck in by the wind flow, by the glider flying forward, part of your glider is stuck onto the lines, and then you can see that part of your canopy is just stuck against the line and is not flying anymore. So this is the front cravat. As you can see on this picture, the wind is coming below the glider a little bit and the canopy is stuck on the line. This is a typical front cravat. Then we have the cravat from the back, or the back cravat, which is when the glider is stalling and then the one part of the canopy is stuck on the line by the fact that the glider is stalling, the glider is flying backwards. So we would think that this is a glider most commonly experienced by acropilots, but actually this is kind of wrong because this is a kind of cravat that is experienced a lot by leisure pilot as well, because it's a cravat that comes from a pilot's mistake, from handling a flying incident. And then we have the line over cravat, which is the most well-known, I would say, that everyone thinks about this kind of cravat when they think about a cravat, is the line over cravat, which is also the rarest. So it's the one you less encounter in flying. It's when you have basically a line coming over your canopy. This is the line over cravat. The line over cravat is often what I call the unsolvable situation, but we'll see that later. Okay? Each of those cravats have a way to behave in order to handle them. So they have a way to act as a pilot in order to recover from those cravats. Okay? So first of all, in order to behave, in order to react to a cravat, you have to understand how you end up with this cravat, okay? Because it's often part of the solution. So how to end up with front cravat? Usually it's unchecked collapses. So basically the pilot gets a collapse, he does not check it, and he does not do anything afterwards. It can happen, particularly with high aspect ratio gliders, that you get a front cravat. So the glider collapses, then he's stuck with the wind flow, and then the glider just stays stuck there, and it's a front cravat. Every time you would get a loss of tension in the line. So for example, for a spiral dive with an unchecked exit, so an exit which is not mastered, you get a loss of tension in the line. You may end up with a front cravat. And of course, you have also pilot's mistake during exercises. Most commonly, it's during SIVs courses. You can end up with cravats and with front cravats. Okay. How to recover from a front cravat? Well, the first thing you have to do with any type of cravat is to keep the direction. As I said before, in how to behave, it's super important to keep flying straight. Okay. Once you are flying straight, then you have all the time in the world to recover from the cravat. It means that if you are in control, then you are not in a risk of going into autorotation. Then you have all the time in the world to try things. And the first thing you should try as a pilot is the stabilo line. Why? Because the stabilo line is the most efficient way to recover from a front cravat. What is the stabilo line? Basically, the stabilo line is usually situated on the B riser of your canopy and is usually a different color from the rest of your lines. Quite often, it's also a thin line which is going completely on the outside and is in a different color. And you can see that it's attached to the stabilo. In two-liners, quite often you don't have a stabilo line anymore. So basically, with a two-liner, quite often the brake is the only way to recover from a cravat, but under two-liners, most of the time you have a stabilo line. What you need to do with the stabilo line is pull quite strongly onto it to untangle the stabilo, okay? To untangle the tip, and then the glider will be open. You might need to pull quite strong. That is an interesting part is that most pilots, they will pull slightly like this and nothing will happen. It might happen that you have to stand up in the harness, take it very high and pull all the way down to recover from the cravat. It might happen, and this is no problem, okay? The stabilo line is not the brakes. Usually I would advise you to release the brake and take the stabilo line in order to not brake with the stabilo line, all right? But this is the most efficient way, and this is the safest way because it does not require any technical skills. You don't need to be able to stall. You don't need to be able to do anything. You just grab the stabilo line, pull down, and the glider reopens. The second the second thing you can do is you can try pumping with the brakes on the side of the cravat. Okay, it's can be quite efficient, not always, but it can be quite efficient. It's not as efficient as the stabilo line, but it works sometimes, okay? When I say pumping with the brakes, it means like making a strong and deep input with the brake and releasing immediately, okay? In order to make the glider go a little bit backwards and forward, and then because the canopy is stuck with the forward motion of your glider, going a little bit backward will untangle the canopy, all right? But be careful, you need to be able to keep flying straight while you do so. So do not forget the overhand and do not go hands up, you pump and then you go straight to autorotation. You need to be able to keep flying straight, okay? And the last option, the most difficult one, obviously, is the one most acropilot will use first, which is always a mistake, is a fast stall, a deep stall. Basically, anything that is making the glider go backwards will reopen a cravat, okay? It's mostly used by acropilot, and it's not always the most efficient way because you might create a bigger mess. So as a leisure pilot, I advise to first go on the stabilo line, then try pumping, and then the stall if you are very experienced in them, but otherwise, then if you cannot reopen it, it's a rescue situation. But otherwise, if you are experienced in stall, always try to stall symmetrically to avoid any twisting movement, okay? You might see in SIV courses pilots with CCC gliders doing spins in order to reopen cravat. This is efficient as well, but this is way more difficult. All right, so you need a bigger mastery. So it's way easier for a normal pilot to make a fast stall and release. Okay. So this is how to recover from a front cravat. All right. I have a small video of myself getting a front cravat. I'm a bit sorry because it's gonna go a bit fast, so I will slow it down on the second try. So the backup story is I was trying some tricks in Garda Lake in 2018, and those tricks involved getting a lot of collapses and cravats, and basically I was aware that I was gonna get a cravat regularly during those flights, and so I was really thinking it over what I should do. That's why I reacted quite fast, and that's also an important thing, is that when you are aware of what type of cravat they are and what to do in order to recover, you can react pretty fast and so save a lot of altitude, which is quite precious. All right, so we will watch it one time in real speed. And then I stall. All right. So basically, what I use for this cravat, to solve this cravat, is a stall. So if I pause, you can see that then I get the cravat, which is a front cravat. You can see that all the canopy is stuck in the forward motion of the glider. And as soon as I will stall the glider, which I'm doing right away, the glider just opens straight away. Okay. So this is what I mean with a front cravat. It means that any backward motion is gonna open a front cravat. Okay, so that's a quite important thing. So everything that will go backwards will open it, but the stabilo line remains the most important one. So now we're gonna talk about the cravat from the back. The cravat from the back is kind of my favorite one, you could say, because it's the less known one, and it's also the most dangerous one, because it's a really common one first. It's the one that comes only from pilot's mistake, and it's one that is really easy to solve. So as you will see. So basically how to end up with a cravat from the back. usually it's when you get a side collapse in a rolling or high pendulum movement. So basically you are going with some wing overs, you get an inside collapse a little bit, and then you apply too much brake, you will get with a back cravat. If you lose tension in the lines and you apply too much brake, then you end up with a back cravat from the back. And it's always like this. In every situation, a cravat from the back is due to a pilot error. Why? Because a cravat from the back means that the glider is stalling, means that the glider is going backwards and hitting back part of the canopy, and is stuck by the fact that the glider is stalled. And that's really interesting because you can get cravat from the back only with a pilot error. And basically, it happens quite often because pilot tends to panic. They panic, they brake, then they end up with a cravat from the back, and it looks really, it's kind of scary. Okay, it's super scary because it looks like the glider is completely closed. It looks like a huge cravat when usually it's just an easy thing to recover from. So basically, how to recover from a cravat from the back? You just have to go hands up. And when you go hands up, the glider will fly, the cravat will reopen. And most of the time, like 99% of the time, you don't have to do anything else than going hands up. And that's what's really interesting about the cravat from the back, is that there is no super technical thing, there is no super technical tip. It's just like go hands up and the glider will fly. And you will hear a lot of SIV instructors and a lot of really experienced instructors telling to students, just go hands up when you have when you don't understand, because then the glider will reopen and everything will be all right. And you hear a lot of people saying, I went for the rescue, I released the brakes, everything reopened, and then I didn't need my rescue anymore. It's most of the time due to a cravat from the back, because it looks like it's a dead-end situation. It looks like you won't recover from it. And then at the end, just the fact that going hands up makes that you recover from this cravat, okay? Sometimes if the glider does not fly straight away when you go hands up, you just fast stall it hands up, just a big input and hands up, and it just makes the glider shoot and it reopens, okay? So I have a few videos of cravat from the back from the same day, and I had really bad days in 2018. So I had all of them in the same day. So as you will see, it looks impressive. I will put it again twice. It looks impressive, but just going hands up usually solve it. Okay? So I miss the maneuver. I get this big cravat, which is looking really bad. I go hands up and it opens. It's pretty fast, obviously. So we can watch it again when I stop. So I miss the maneuver. Then I try to stop it. I apply too much brake. So it's a pilot mistake. Then I end up under the glider with a lot of brakes because I want to be safe. And then I end up with a cravat from the back. You can really see now that I have the leading edge going forward and half of the glider which is stuck in the back. So immediately after I see what the cravat is, you can see that my hand, they go completely upwards in order to let the glider fly. And then the glider just reopen by itself. Okay? That is really important in a cravat from the back. We can watch it one time. And then I go hands up and the glider reopens. I always thought that the reopening of cravat from the back is a bit like magic because it looks like super scary situation and you think it's impossible to recover from it. And you think when you see videos on the internet that the acro pilot recovering from it is a master because he must know something you don't, he must act, he must make some really impressive brake input in order to recover, when in fact, just going hands up opens everything, and it's not a question of skills, it's a question of being smart and recognizing when what type of cravat you have. I have another video of a cravat from the back, this one with some slow motions. So I was trying some tricks in Gania in Spain. I messed up, which happens often. And then, as again, it goes very fast. So if we check it step by step, I miss the trick. So I get the collapse. I brake a bit. So if I was hands up all the way, it would be okay. But then I use the brake, as you can see. And then I analyze what type of cravat I have. I see it's a cravat from the back. So what I do, I go completely hands up. And the glider just reopens it's like magic. It reopens. In this case, it put me a little bit of a twist, but that's not such a big problem. And then I release, okay? So it's super important to recognize those cravat, mainly to recognize a cravat from the back, from a cravat from the front. If you get one, you need to just go hands up. So now let's go to the line of a cravat. So it's also quite interesting because there are several ways to end up with one. But usually a big collapse with a loss of tension on a sideway movement, like on a big roll, you get a collapse. So the glider just rolling. When it reopens, you might end up with a line over. This is the least possible thing that can happen to you because it happens really rarely. But most of the time, line over cravat is a badly handled cravat from the back. So that's what's interesting about cravat from the back is that they are the least well known. It's really easy to recover from them, but if you do completely bad, if you do completely the wrong thing on a cravat from the back, you might end up with a line over cravat really fast. So that's why it's super important to recognize them, because a line of a cravat is almost unsolvable in most of the case, okay? So if you get a cravat from the back, you keep stalling, you might end up with a line of a cravat. That's quite possible, okay? How to recover from a line of a cravat? Well, it's really hard to recover from it. First of all, why? Because if you have a line going over your glider, in order for the line to fly away, it will need to slide along your glider. So to slide along your glider will, in many cases, burn your glider. So it will destroy your equipment. So if you have a 6,000 euro Xenon from Nova, you don't want to destroy it by stalling a line of a cravat. You prefer to throw your rescue, pack your rescue, maybe if you don't know how to pack, pay some 150 euro to pack it, and save your 6,000 euro Xenon from terrible damage, okay? So that's why I always advise to not try to recover from a line of a cravat, but just try to pull the rescue. Sometimes, in some cases, several stalls in a row might do the tricks, but it will involve the line sliding away from the glider, so damaging the glider. Because you have to remember, if the line is going above your glider and is in tension, it means that you have all your weight on that line. So in order to slide away, it will slide with all your weight pulling on that line. So basically, the glider is in between you and the and this line. So rescue is often the best solution. Which happens sometimes is that with a line of a cravat, your glider is flying pretty okay. And for me, it's quite important if your glider is flying pretty okay to not think that you can land with it. It's not because your glider is flying okay with line of a cravat that it will be flying okay at 100 meters above the ground with maybe some thermals or some turbulences or some wing gradient or something like this. So it's not because the glider is flying well at 1,000 meters with a line over that it will fly well at 100 meters. So I think rescue is often the best solution with a line of a cravat. What you can do sometimes, if you can handle the wing, is place yourself in a safe place to pull the rescue. That's completely possible. All right. I have a video though of a line of a cravat that was reopened. I forgot to mention that line of a cravat happened a lot to acropilot in debug jump from helicopter quite often. Because then you can have, well, if you don't pack your debug personally, you can have a really mean friend that make a line of a cravat, or sometimes it's a packing mistake or anything. So in this case, it was a packing mistake. So the pilot jumped from the helicopter, get a cravat, stall it, and end up with a line of a cravat, and he keeps stalling, and the glider reopens. So we can watch it again. So the glider opens, and then it's quite badly open. It's a mix between a cravat from the front and a cravat from the back, and he keeps stalling. And at some point, the glider is inflated again, and you have a line over cravat with the line going over the glider. And also the leg are completely out, but that's not the problem. And then he managed to stall it away by stalling, and the glider reopens, okay? This is one of the cases where it did work, did not damage the wing, but it's purely, it's 1 out of 100. So I really advise, if you're a leisure pilot, to pull the rescue, all right? So it's, speaking about rescue, and about cravats, you have to consider the twist. And the cravats in paragliding are what I would say a safe incident in the case that you are still under control. You still have your brakes in the end, you can still control your wing. And the twists are another matter. So the twists are way more simple and way more complicated in the way that they happen. So basically, what are twists? Twists are when you get twisted, so like a reverse lunge, but added to 1, 10, 15 times sometimes. Okay, twist and where your risers are entangled and your lines are entangled as well. Okay, how to end up with a twist? Well, many situations, a collapse at full speed, so the glider is flying in one direction, you are at full speed, the collapse is to the left, so the glider goes to the left, you are flying completely straight, so your body stays straight, your glider is going to the left, then you are getting so twisted. Some pilots mistake during incident, most of the time spinning or something, and then it spins, your body does not follow, you get twisted. Acro flying, you get twisted on purpose sometimes, but it's still you still get twisted. And what are the risks of getting twisted? So first of all, when you are getting twisted, you cannot control your wing correctly. So we all experience that in the beginning of flying career. We are trying to reverse lunge. We are learning reverse lunge. We pull the right brake, and then it's the left wing that turns, okay? And you're like, why? And we all remember this moment. We all remember the frustration learning to reverse lunge. Well, learning to fly twisted in the air is exactly the same. It means that it's gonna be complicated, and the more twist you have, the more complicated it is to handle the wing. And at some point, it's even impossible because your brakes are completely stuck in the twist and you cannot handle the wing. That's why twists are so dangerous, because it completely cut off the glider control a pilot may have about the incident. So sometimes you cannot even do anything. So the risk of twists are basically autorotation, because you cannot counter the rotation, or sometimes you create the rotation by pulling strong on the wrong brake, stuck brake when you cannot control the brake, falling into the canopy when you stall the glider and then you cannot control the chute because your brakes are stuck, and of course damage equipment. When you have a lot of twist, you try to do something, it burns all the light. But it is a least important problem because it's not life-threatening. All right? So the thing about twists is that you have several recovery techniques, which are all some are really easy, some are really difficult.
Audio capture.
First thing first, if you get twisted, is that you need to keep flying straight. It's the same rule as with all incidents, you need to keep flying straight, okay? If the glider is flying straight by itself, sometimes just waiting is quite effective. So just waiting is sometimes working super well, but it needs to be stable. If the glider is trying to turn, then waiting won't do the job. But if the glider is flying straight, it works. Spreading the risers, sometimes it works as well. It's quite effective with a low amount of twist. It starts to be less effective when you have a high amount of twist. My favorite technique, and the one that works the best, is stand up and run in the harness. So like you see skydivers doing sometimes, is you stand up in the harness and you start running, making fast movement with the leg. It's highly effective if you have a lot of twist. It's highly effective if you are stuck in a stall. Because it suddenly creates a rotation of your body, and usually it creates it to the right direction because your body wants to turn in this direction. The twist wants to undo themselves. So usually it works very well. The last effective solution is to spin the glider, but this is the riskiest because you have first to spin the glider in the right direction. If you spin it to the wrong direction, then obviously that's a problem. And then you have to spin it the right amount, and you have to handle the exit of the spin when you get untwisted, okay? And then if none of those techniques worked, the rescue is a good recovery technique, all right? What you need to absolutely not do is move if your glider is flying straight, okay? If you start to move in the harness and the glider was flying straight while you were twisted, then you might create a rotation, and then that's where you end up in trouble. Which brings us to the second point, is never let the glider go into autorotation. Why? Because first of all, it's really hard to exit an autorotation twisted, super complicated. And second of all, when you pull the rescue in autorotation, it's one of the most dangerous way of pulling the rescue, because the glider is turning so fast around you that most of the time it catches your rescue, and it can slow down the rescue opening or even prevent it. So it's super important to never let the glider go into rotation. Super important to never release the brakes and to spread the risers. Always keep your brakes. Why? Because if somehow your glider is stalling and you are spreading the risers and you release the brake because they were stuck, suddenly they will, after some twist are undone, the brake will just go hands up and you don't have them in the end, you will fall into your canopy, okay? Never stall the glider if it's not already stalled, of course, except if you go into auto rotations and do whatever you need to exit. But if the glider is flying, never stall it, because then you need to be able to handle it twisted. Never go hands up if the glider is stalled, in order to not fall into your canopy. And never release the brake to pull the rescue if you can. It means that if you are not stuck under, if your brakes are not stuck and you can pull the rescue, do not release the brake, because if you release the brake, sometimes the glider just shoots forward. Funny thing though is that all these lists, I've done all those mistakes in one incident in 2015, like all of them in one flight. And I ended up with the rescue. It was in Dubai. We were doing a training flight for a competition in front of the Prince of Dubai, really big show. And I opened in the helicopter with a lot of twists, and it was more or less flying straight. I tried to move. The glider went into auto rotation. So I kind of managed to stall it away. Then I was in stall. I released the brake to run. And when I released the brake, suddenly the brake flew off and I saw the glider shoot forward. And then so I stalled the glider before, I released the brake, the glider shoots, and then I pull the rescue and fall into the canopy at the same time. And then I was under the rescue. But I did all those mistakes in one flight. That's how I made the list, actually. I said, okay, this is what you need not registered. All right. So I have some videos about getting twisted. This one is a famous YouTube video. It's like went viral on YouTube, of a guy getting a lot of twists and just doing nothing and not panicking and just keep flying straight. And the glider actually, he untwisted himself and started flying forward perfectly. And it's a perfect example of don't panic. Just if the glider is flying straight, just wait, and it's highly effective. First interesting to trick, get twisted. And sometimes not panic. The brake, which is not good, but okay. Then there's like maybe 7 or 8 twists.
Théo, we can't hear you with the video.
Just waiting, just make the glider reopen. So just waiting, the twists are undone, and he's waiting, and suddenly no twist anymore. That's one of the most efficient way of releasing twist. If your glider is flying straight, just wait, okay? So we can just watch how many twists he has. I will just, okay. Here you can see how many twists he has. It's quite a lot, but yet the glider is flying straight. So in this scenario, if the glider is flying straight, just don't do anything and it will start untwist you. And that's what's happening to him. He's just untwisting. He is lucky enough to not go into the tree direction. It's perfect, and he just have to wait, and it's the luckiest day of his life. So this happens quite often. Here is a video of me debugging. So as you probably already saw, I have a lot of really bad video of debugging. I'm really bad. I mean, never registered. Let me pack your debug if you ever jump from an helicopter. It's a bad idea, and you will see why. You will see why. So I jumped from the debug and ended up with a lot of twists. Again, a lot of twists. And what I did is I tried to spin it in order to reopen. So this is the spinning technique. And as you can see, it's a bit messy because it's really hard to find the right amount of spin. If you find it, then it's untwisting. But it's a really not super efficient technique. And the problem of debugging, obviously, is that when your glider opens, it's already stalled. So basically, you just have this spinning option. But then you can see I try to spin it, and then I get collapses, and I struggle to find the right amount of spin. And it's a really big mess. Fortunately, I'm quite high. And it's just like spinning to open everything. All right? So this is one video, I have another video of me debugging, which again, I think it happens to every time I debug from an helicopter. I'm a really bad packer. And in this one, the spin is a bit more efficient. Basically, the glider is flying. It opens with a lot of twists, and I immediately notice the side of the twist. So I will put it back again. My technique, if ever you get a lot of twists, is when I get twisted, I always watch the upper part of the twist, which means that the side which is going above the rest of the twist is the side I have to pull on the brakes. Okay? So if I see that it's the right tip that is going forward, I know that I need to pull the right tip, all right, in order to spin it. So if the lines which are above are going to the right tip, I need to pull the right brake. In this case, it's the right brake. Oh, sorry. In this case, it's the right brake. Okay, perfect. And then
SWB
I open the
audio
twist.
captured, not registered.
Sorry, I move forward. So I spin it, and then it untwists everything at once. All right? This is quite a lucky move. It's not planned. It was a bit more lucky than skilled on this one. But so if ever you get a lot of twists, remember this. If the upper part of the twist, the line which is going above everything else, is going to one tip, this is the side you need to spin, whenever you need it. Then I have this video of pretty much everything we talked about earlier, summarized in one. So it's cravat from the back, cravat from the front, twists, everything summarized in one incident. And this is a perfect summary of going hands up. So let's watch it. I was trying some tricks in Organia with the glitch from Nova. I get this strange collapse, and then I get this moment of really big craziness, all right? So we can watch it step by step. So basically, I get the tip collapsed, and then I see this. I was not expecting this at all. I was like really surprised. And then I see this. So basically, I get a front cravat, which becomes also a cravat from the back, and then I'm twisted as well, and the glider is turning above my head, and it's a really little small, I remember that I saw it as a really small point above my head, which is not supposed to be that small. And so first thing I thought in my head was rescue. And you can see that I'm actually going to release the brakes in order to pull the rescue. But then I figured, well, I'm still high, I can at least try one thing, okay, before I pull the rescue. And the thing I said, I thought, okay, the first thing I'll try is go hands up. So I said, okay, I don't pull the rescue, I go hands up. And as you can see, the moment I go hands up, everything opens, and then I just have a small twist, which is just a half twist, so I spin it away. But the moment I go hands up, the glider completely reopens perfectly. And it's really,
not registered.
well, it's the story of my life in acropower gliding. As soon as you end up with really deep trouble, really big trouble, always try to go hands up first. Because sometimes, like this one, it works perfectly. All right, so it's super important, and in paragliding it's the same. First thing first, try to go hands up. If you don't understand what's going on, try to go hands up, see what's going on, and then if it's worse, then you pull the rescue or you try something else. But first thing first, always go hands up. And in this case, it was all the incident at once, and just going hands up made it reopen. All right. So last item, we'll go really shortly about autorotation because it's a long subject, is autorotation. So what is autorotation? Autorotation is any kind of rotation that is not wanted by the pilot. So any kind of rotation that the glider is turning and the pilot did not want the glider to turn. So I made a tutorial on YouTube about autorotation, and this is just a small extract of this tutorial. I advise you to check it if you're interested in the subject, because I cover it in its entirety, but otherwise this is just a small part. Basically, you have to remember that the autorotation is the worst situation you can end up in, so always try to stay away from it. However, if you get into autorotation, throwing the rescue is a bit tricky. So if you have the altitude, always try to exit the autorotation before throwing the rescue. To exit, there is no mind-blowing tricks, there is no super technical skills. You just need to counter, harness, plus brake. Okay? So we can see it in the video now. I pull a collapse. The glider is going into auto-rotation. I'm in auto-rotation. And then I just weight shift and brake.
SWB
I
audio
counter
capture,
in order
not
to exit the
registered.
rotation. Okay? There is no mind-blowing trick. You just need to weight shift and brake, counter in order to fly straight. If the glider still do not fly straight, it means that you don't have enough brake or don't have enough weight shift. Super important to go weight shift first because you need to lean out of the rotation in order to really be able to pull the right amount of brake. But otherwise, there is no super complicated tricks, just weight shift and brake. All right? So that's it about all the flying incidents. Nova actually is making a set of presentation like this one about various subjects. It's called Nova Insight. It's starting in middle of February, and we have a lot of different subjects covering. So if you are interested, just follow the Nova pages and the YouTube channel in order to keep on some interesting parts. Philippe Medicus, who will talk, I think, in the online Stubaicup, we also talk in the Nova Insight, so it's a really interesting point of view on glider design. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, happy to answer them all.
Thanks for your presentation and awesome video shots and pictures. Thanks for that.
My pleasure.
Maybe we have the one or other questions.
Yes, we have some. So the first question was, would you recommend a steerable rescue even without quick out carabiners?
Yeah, definitely. For me, steerable reserves are the best reserves on the market. Quick out carabiners are not compulsory because there are many ways to bring back the glider, to kill the glider, so it does not bother the steerable reserve. Basically, either you use the brakes or the rear risers or anything, but you can always kill the glider and you don't need quick out carabiners in order to manage a steerable reserve.
Perfect. Maybe you can also do, the next question is, what are the pros and cons of a
SWB
steerable
audio
and
capture,
unsteerable rescue?
not registered.
Well, most of the pros are for steerable rescues. Basically, the steerable reserves, you can, first of all, steer them. But the sink rate is incredible. It's around between 3 and 4 meters per second, sometimes even less. The cons is that they need some set of rules in order to use them. So it's not so easy to use them. You don't just open them and wait for you to fall down. You need to steer them. You need to neutralize the glider. This is the main cons. But otherwise, it's the safest rescue we have. But the pros of non-steerable reserve is that you can just throw them away, they open, and then that's it. You don't have to do anything else, and you just need to kill the wing, but you don't even need to bring it back, or you just need to break it, then it doesn't bother the rescue. But the big cons is that it's going down super fast, between 4.5 and 5.5 meters per second. And this is fast. This is like this is a bit more than 20 kilometers per hour. It's like hitting a wall on a bicycle. It's painful. And that's what a non-steerable reserve is. So yeah. Also a pro is that they are easier to pack, but most people don't pack their own reserve. They pay someone to do it. And those people that you pay to pack your reserve can also pack your steerable reserve. So this is not a real con, in my opinion.
Okay, so you already answered the next question about repacking a steerable and a non-steerable reserve. So we go to the next one. Sometimes people get confused and lean the wrong way in auto-rotation. I just remember to lean towards the open side.
Yeah, so this works obviously only if your auto-rotation is due to a collapse or a cravat. But yes, if you are confused in auto-rotation, just lean towards the open side. Basically, that's the side that you need to lean toward to. You put the brake also. Also, in many cases, the auto-rotation is pulling you inside the rotation. So in your harness, you will feel that you are falling inside the rotation, usually. And if you want to exit, you just need to lean outside. Basically, if it's easy to lean in one direction, it's the wrong direction. Okay, if it feels like it's super easy to weight shift in this direction, it's the wrong one. So you need to lean out and on the difficult side, and then it will be the right one.
Okay, perfect. Can you please tell what's the best exit in double twisted auto-rotation scenario? If reserve is the only one, then what way to throw it and how hard?
So if you have several twists and you are in auto-rotation, I think, in my opinion, what I would do, I try to never end up in this situation, but it happened, unfortunately. And what I try to do is first I counter, so as hard as possible on the brakes. So I try to think it first, so to see which side the rotation is going, and then I go as hard as I can with the brakes. If you have only 2 twists, your brakes are still functioning, okay? If you don't know what side the auto-rotation is, try to go as hard as possible on both brakes. And maybe you might stall the glider, but it's not a big problem because it's less bad than an auto-rotation. But as hard as you can on both brakes in order to exit the rotation. In the best case scenario, it will just create a big pitch and exit like a spiral exit. In the worst case, you will stall the glider, but in both cases, it's a better solution. And if you cannot exit the auto-rotation, well, there are no best case scenario of throwing a reserve, but what I did and what I advise people to do is to throw it as hard as possible upwards and not sideways, but really upwards in order to really, because in auto-rotation, even if it's a really fast one, you are not going down like 30 meters per second. Sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's even a bit less. And the glider is rotating really fast. But if you throw it upward enough, then the rescue will go out of the line of the glider and will go above you, above the sink rate of the glider, and then it might have more chances of opening. But it still remains kind of the most difficult situation you can end up in.
Okay, thanks. Is a special position in the harness when occur the incidents?
Sorry? Can you repeat the question?
Is a special position in the harness when occur the incidents? So would you do like, I think, just move somewhere or just get...
Well, I think the best way is to sit up. Okay, if you are in a pod harness, don't like just lean out. Always bring your leg down and try to sit up in the harness in order to, first of all, avoid getting twisted more or getting twisted in the first place. Okay. If you get a collapse or a cravat, try to take the leg down and sit up a little bit. It will bring you closer to your risers. Otherwise, there is no bad position. The most important is that you are able to handle your wing. But I would say sit up is the best solution.
Perfect. And would you recommend a steerable reserve also for beginner pilots, like 15 hours flying per year?
I don't think there is there is a bad customer for a steerable reserve. So even a beginner pilot, what I think is if you buy a steerable reserve, you have to gather knowledge on it. You have to gather what you have to do in order to use it. It's useless to buy a steerable reserve, put it in your harness, forget about it, and then one day you need it, but you don't know how to use it. If you buy a steerable reserve, try to understand what to do to use it. Try to like print the procedure in your head so that when you have to use it, the procedure is clear, clean, and you are able to do it flawlessly. And even if you have 200 or 300 hours or 50 hours, it doesn't change anything because we don't spend hours on rescues. We don't most pilots, they use their reserve less than once in their life. Most pilots never use it. Some pilots use it once. So it's hard to be experienced on reserve, except if you are an acro pilot, but otherwise it's hard to be experienced on reserve. So whether you have 10 hours or 200 hours, it doesn't matter. Just if you buy a steerable reserve, learn the procedure, learn how to use it, and really remember it.
Okay. After several spins, should we get the lines checked? Do they get enough friction to get damaged?
Yeah. If you get twisted a lot and you use the brakes, in any cases, if you get twisted a lot, always check your lines. It's, not 100% of the case, but it happens quite often that the lines are burned and you have to change them. It's super often. Funny story is I was in Holidays a few months ago and I pulled the rescue because I fall into my canopy and I checked my lines visually. And what I didn't check was the upper section of my lines because I thought that I had no reason to. And on the next flight, all the upper section of my lines set broke, exploded mid-flight during a trick, basically because it had burned during the incident. So whenever you get an incident, check your all line set carefully. Okay, I didn't, and then I ended up under the rescue again on the next flight. So 2 flights under the rescue because I didn't check it carefully. So it's super important to check your all equipment carefully, whatever the incident is, because something might be damaged and you don't want to fly with a damaged equipment. It's still your life under your equipment.
Perfect, thanks. One more question. Are there more errors able by repacking steerable rescues when packing by yourself? That's more. Is it more difficult? I think.
SWB audio
It's not more
capture,
difficult.
not
It's
registered.
different. It's not a really more difficult way of packing. It looks a bit more difficult, but actually, if you follow it, the steps, it's not way more difficult. It's just that you have to take care about more things, like you have 2 risers instead of usually 1 on a non-steerable reserve. You have a leading edge and a trailing edge, while on a non-steerable reserve, you just have the leading edge, that's it. And that's not super complicated, actually. They have really good tutorials on the internet about packing steerable reserve. Manufacturers makes great videos about how to pack their rescues in general.
So it's a good point. We have a question about another tutorial. Can you make a video about the important things to think of by throwing a steerable rescue?
Yes, I'm preparing a tutorial with iAdventure, the company that makes the beamers, about how to use the rescue and how to use steerable reserve. So I'm making a tutorial about that because I think it's quite important for the paragliding community because it's a subject that's more and more talked about, and that's more and more pilots understand that it's an important subject and that it's not a shame to for the rescue. It's not the 1980s anymore, so it's good, but still we don't have enough content about rescues, and I will try to make one which is, I hope, helpful.
Perfect. We're looking forward to it. So it was the last question. So if yours don't have any more questions, let's see, maybe there's one more, but
thank you, Théo, for the awesome presentation and also for your time spending on the second Stubaicup online. It was very nice to have you here, and it's a very interesting team.
So there are two more questions. Okay. Sorry, Théo.
No problem.
First question: what is the best harness for
SWB audio capture?
It's a difficult question. We have a lot of harnesses for acro flying. I would say that I will not name a brand in particular because it's difficult to really say which one is best, but I would say that we have 2 categories, the base harnesses and the normal acro harnesses. And I would say that first of all, if you buy a base harness, check that you have 2 rescue in addition to the base canopy, so you have still 2 extra chances, because if the base canopy does not work or if you can't throw it, it's important to have 2 more chances. And check out that your base canopy is mounted carefully and well. And then I would say that the two rescue option is very good for beginners as well as for expert pilots, but you need to have really good rescues in them. That's the main thing. So whether you buy a base canopy or 2 rescue canopy, both are 2 rescue harness, both are really good. But in all the cases, just buy quality rescues in those harnesses. Don't buy the €50, 15 years old rescues that you find on internet because you want to save money. I would say it's better to buy a 300 harness that is old on the internet and 2 new rescues than the opposite.
Perfect. Thanks for your time, Théo. So 4 weeks to go. Hope to see you at the Stubaicup, and we're having a great time here by beautiful weather. A lot of people coming around. So if somebody didn't register now, just check on our website stubaicup.at and get your registration for the Stubaicup. So hope to see you all again in 4 weeks, and have a nice evening. Thanks for your time, Théo.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.